Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dating After Divorce podcast. I have another guest here with me today to talk about her divorce and remarriage story. We are going to get into possibilities in dating. I'm super excited to bring you Gunila Pederson. Gunila is a fellow life coach. She is a weight loss coach for women. Gunila, welcome, and please introduce yourself to the listeners.
Yeah, hi, Zeta. I'm so thrilled to be on the podcast. Thank you so much for inviting me. I love sharing my story about my dating experience and how it went because it was all kind of like not as I had planned it or how my life was planned in general. So yes, I am a weight loss coach for women. I'm also a small animal veterinarian. So I am a weight loss coach and a veterinarian both. And I was first introduced to coaching years ago when my kids first became teenagers, and I was actually struggling to communicate with them. I was feeling I was a very bad mom, and I felt I was struggling. And then I was introduced to life coaching, and I realized there was so much about mindset that I had no clue how our thoughts, our thinking. And this is actually something I then took in with me as a small animal veterinarian. And I was always very, very fascinated about the whole nutrition. A lot of pets were struggling with weight loss, and then I could see owners were struggling with weight loss, and that's just kind of how I transitioned into helping women with their weight loss, because I could see how big it's basically mindset more than anything than what we actually eat. So that's what I work with, the mindset. Yeah.
Yes, mindset is huge. And sometimes I think we can't say it enough. It almost becomes like, well, yeah. I know it's my mindset. I know it's my thoughts. I know it's my thinking. But I think we really get into our transformations in our lives when we truly get it, that it really is our mindset. And what I'm so excited about your story is the fact that your mindset is the one that I'm constantly trying to get my clients to see when they're dating, right? Like almost anyone can download a dating app. Anyone can put up a profile. Anyone can get dressed and go on a date. But what makes the difference between the person who has a good time dating, who breezes through the process, who picks the right person, who creates the right relationship after, really is mindset, right? And when you and I chatted earlier on, we talked about just how much possibility you saw. So I'd love for you to just jump right in and talk about all the possibilities that caused you to just jump right in. And you were like, I wanted to meet all the men. I wanted to date all the people. So just kind of tell us a little bit about how you got started dating after your divorce.
Yeah, I love when we had a little prep talk and you actually kind of coached me on the spot. This is just how I can say this, because I was saying, like, when I got divorced, so I got married very young. I was 19 and I got married. I'm Danish myself. I got married to a Spanish man. We had very different cultural backgrounds, and there came a point where I felt really trapped in my marriage. So the point when we then grew apart and we got divorced, I just had this, I just felt so free. And I felt like I had not really dated anybody else in that sense. He was my first. And so I was like, I just exactly that. I want to meet all the men. I want to see what's out there. I want to try it all. And I was telling you, I felt like I was almost like being a teenager again. And I was actually judging myself for that. But then you were like, yeah, you were seeing other possibilities. And I'm like, yeah, actually, now you mention it, it's actually a good thing, isn't it?
Yes.
Because I was totally judging myself for that. Yeah.
And our teenagers, our young people, I mean, those of us who are a little bit older, I'm in my 40s now. When I look at young people, I look at my kids who are young adults and teenagers, they want to do all the things. They see the possibilities in life. And I think that view of life, I mean, sometimes it does lead them to make some poor choices, but I think we were meant to keep that magic throughout our lives. I don't think we were ever meant to lose seeing just how big the world is and what's out there, and wanting to keep that sense of adventure and wanting to continue to explore. So I think you were amazing. It was, even if you were beating up on yourself a little bit, it was amazing. And it got you to where you are.
Yeah, it did. I didn't it didn't go as I had planned, because I got divorced, and then straight after, I was lucky because I had an amicable divorce. So we had shared custody. So I had my kids 1 week, he had the kids another week, which meant that I had a week of freedom every other week, which meant that I could go dating and I could move as well. So as much as I was working already as a veterinarian, but I could move when I had any free time. I wasn't tied up at home. So it also made me not restrict myself to, oh, I need to date someone only in my village. I was like, okay, whatever is in Spain, I'll just move wherever. I will take a train wherever I can, if it seems like fun, and let's see what happens. Yeah.
Right. And so, and you were living in Spain at the time. So my understanding is that in Europe, you're able to like move between so many countries, like within a couple of hours.
So yes, I mean, I did restrict myself to Spain, but within Spain, it's like all the way to the northern Spain, so 4 or 5 minute drive, 4 or 5 hour drive. I was happy to do if it meant meeting someone interesting.
Okay, so how did that go? Like, how did you meet them? Did you meet them on an app, or were you introduced to them?
Yeah, I signed up for 2 different apps, and I had a lot of fun with it. So I had like friends writing my description, and really like finding like the right pictures. And it was to me, it was a lot of fun. And I was busy. I was dating a lot of different people, and I just sometimes would literally get confused. At one point, I signed up for dates for 2 guys that were called the same thing, and then when we talked on the phone, I didn't realize I was talking to the wrong one. So it was a bit crazy, but it was fun.
Yeah. And I know a lot, I've actually heard a lot of women when I talk to them about just like that, those early stages of dating and not closing off their options, like don't just date one person and see where it goes, because you're sort of narrowing yourself to almost being in a relationship with someone you've just met. They have that concern, like, well, I don't want to seem to be a cheater. I don't want to be, I guess a slut or whatever. They have this icky feeling about something like what you just described happening, of like talking to one guy and mistaking him for another, or having one guy find out that they're talking to other men. And that thinking keeps them sort of like in this, like, I need to be in this perfect little good girl mode when they're dating. And it doesn't often lead to meeting really good people. How did you deal? Did you ever have the thought, oh, they're going to find out that I'm talking to more people and they're going to be mad? Or did that ever worry you?
No, because it was mainly in the initial states when I was just going on the first date. So it wasn't it wasn't like I was like seriously dating someone and almost like living with each other and still dating. No, like once I got serious with the one who's my husband now, then obviously I didn't date anybody else. So no, yeah.
What do you think of that concept? Like, why do a lot of women feel so like beholden to a person they've just met in that sense? Have you ever thought about that? And I don't know if this has ever come up for you, but I'm just curious, like for a woman who says, well, I'm going on this one date, I don't want to see someone else. And I'm talking at the first date stages. Like, what would you say to someone who's like worried about that?
I would say, I think it's important to meet a lot of guys. Like for example, I always had this thing, like I thought I would like the mysterious, serious guy. And then I actually dated one and he was so boring. And I was like, I'll never, ever, that would never work for me. I need someone with a sense of humor. Now I had not dated this guy like for a few times. At the same time, I was doing something else. Then I wouldn't have known. I think if you just stick to one guy, you might not find out what you definitely don't want, because if you can compare and you're dating several and others are making you laugh and one isn't, then you can see what works for you. I think it's limiting yourself. You definitely might not end up with, I don't believe there's just like the one and only. I think there can obviously be more guys out there that could be your one and only, but you limit yourself. You might not meet him if you stick with the first one.
Yeah. And we don't really know. I found out just from working with just so many women, I found out that a lot of us don't really know what men are like, which is fascinating. And my journey was sort of similar. I was a little bit lucky because I studied engineering. So, I mean, I don't know, there was like 6 of us girls in a class of like 200 and something guys. The big freshman class was huge. So I got a lot of exposure to guys. And so I kind of like sort of knew. But when I'm working with a lot of women, especially some who went to like girls' schools or who had a tight-knit girls' club, then got married, then got divorced. And when you're married, you have your married friends, you hang out with your girls and their husbands, and that's it. And so a lot of women get divorced and don't really know what men are really like. And so a lot of what is informing their choices, like you said, we want the strong, silent type, the mysterious type, the guys we've seen in the movies. Those guys aren't real.
My reference was like Bridget Jones' Diary.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes, I am with you with Colin Firth. I am right there with you. But that guy isn't real.
Exactly. No.
Yeah. All right. So you were dating all these guys, you were having fun, having this adventure. What happened next?
So what happened is I was then like, I'm currently dating two guys. I think it was on the app, just like had a coffee with them and was just chatting online. And then as I was working in my veterinary practice, a client comes in one day and we had a little chat. She left. It was one I knew really well. She had like two little cute dogs. And she then left and I had a coffee break straight after that. So I walked past her shop, but she was sitting outside reading this book I had just read. I'm telling you all this just because it's just like how to show like how this can come out of left field and where you least expect it. Now you have this idea. Anyway, she was reading this book and I was like, oh my God, I just read that book. And we started talking about books. And then she was like, I have more books inside. If you want to borrow some books for me. I came inside. We were talking about tasting books. What do we do on our free time? Anyway, so then she inquired and it came out, well, I was newly divorced and had two kids. And then she said, I have this friend you should meet. So I was like, because I was open to anything. And she's like, he's really fun. He rides some motorbikes. You really sold him. And I thought, that sounds like fun. Yeah, I can meet him for sure. And I didn't even get the whole background, the story where he was from, because this woman was British. I was living in Spain. I didn't know if he was in England, if he was here. But I got the idea that he tended to come on holidays. And I was like, yeah, for sure, I can meet him. So yeah, I gave her my phone number. That's how I met him.
Yeah. I love to ask this question because there is this sense in the air that like, well, when it happens, it just happens. Excuse me. Or some people just get lucky. Or like if a woman hearing your story might be like, well, I don't have a veterinarian practice where I'm going to have a client who's going to come in with cute dogs and introduce me to this handsome guy. Right. So because you're a coach, I want to ask you, how did you create that opportunity to get introduced to your husband?
I think I was in total the mindset of freedom and I could do whatever I want. So anything that comes my way, I'm just gonna, all the doors are open. That was basically it. All the doors are open and I'm just not gonna keep my doors closed at all. Even if it's just a date, I didn't know if it could ever become something because I didn't even know he was living in this country. So
right. And you created it by really just 100% being yourself in that moment, right? Like you were so free in your mind. You were happy to talk about your divorce. You weren't talking about your divorce in this way that was like dark and heavy. And there is that period for most people. There is a period when your divorce is dark and heavy. Like I have been there. I've had the very dark and heavy moments. And when we're in that moment, like that's not the time to date. If your divorce still feels really dark and heavy on you, you're not quite ready to date. It means that you need to be doing the work to get to the place where the divorce doesn't feel dark and heavy, right? And sometimes a lot of women will be trying to date while things feel dark and heavy, while they're not living the life that they want. They're not in that freedom, adventure. Then they haven't done that growth and that healing to get to the point where they're ready to date. And often, sometimes a few of my clients do come and they're kind of like in the middle and we'll create a timeline. I'll be like, well, it sounds like this is still kind of on your mind and this is still a trigger. And we'll work for a couple of months on that dark and heavy part and then start dating. So there's a little bit of a trajectory there. Now, of course, you got there a little bit faster because your divorce was amicable, but you did create it by like being in that space where you're like talking about your divorce and being open to your clients. So I really just want to acknowledge you for that and really show you like you created that moment, because if you were like weird and closed off and bitter, I bet you she was not getting ready to introduce you.
No, that's true. No, we did have a good laugh for sure. Yeah. And that was, the openness. I think that's when you asked me, like, how did I create it? It was like open, just being open and open to what she was saying and me open about my circumstance. Yeah, for sure. There wasn't any bitterness in there.
Yeah. Now, was he divorced? Did he have kids? Like, what was his situation when you met?
So he had been married 3 times, but so he's gone through 2 divorces when he was very young. He was a teenage dad. So his kids are a lot older than mine. So I've only like briefly met them, and they're back in Britain, so they're not really a part of our story. But his last wife died of breast cancer when she was only 40. So, and he had, I think that was a year and a half after then when we met. So he was I wouldn't say he was over it, but he had worked through it, and he was ready to meet someone else at that point. So he was a bit kind of free as well in that aspect.
And did he live in Spain where you were?
No, he had his own business. He had a business in the UK with a business partner. They were setting up alarm system and that, so he could fly over for a few days and kind of plan around his work. So
it was a long distance relationship, basically.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
right. Wow, that's a whole thing in and of itself. So how did your first meeting go? Did she text him and he texted you, or how did you create that first connection?
So I gave my client the phone number, and then I expected him to call straight away because he painted it like he was going to be very interested, and then he didn't, and I forgot a bit about it. I can't remember how long. Probably a few days. And then I was on a beach with a friend, and then he suddenly called me, and because I expected him to call, I wasn't too surprised. And then we kind of talked to and fro, and I said, yeah, I'm happy to meet you, and should we set up a date? And we then decided to go out for dinner together and see. So that's how we first, he called me, and then we set up to go for
dinner. So how did dinner go? We want to hear all the things.
Yes. So first of all, we decided to meet at a place where we both know where there was parking, so we could both come. I'm just telling that because there's a lot of logistics, isn't it? You don't think about when you do these things. In the movies, they're just standing there with the roads and everything.
I know, they're just there. They just arrive at the place.
Yeah.
Right. You have to wait until you don't have your kids, and then you gotta take the train.
Yeah. So his car was half broken, so he made sure he was there before I was, in case his car didn't break down. So he was standing outside having like a cold drink with us, and then one of his neighbors turned up and they were chatting. He's saying, I'm going on this date. And then I came driving, and I was on the phone with my friend, which is obviously a terrible thing, but I was saying, I'm going on this date. And then I reversed into a lamppost straight in front of him and made a huge dent in my car. So that's how we started off.
My gosh. Oh, that's amazing. That's great. That's just great.
Yeah. And we just both then, so I got out, met him, and then we just had a quick soda first, because I thought, let's have a drink first, make sure he's not a complete weirdo, although he comes recommended. I think we both thought, before we go into this big dinner somewhere, then let's have so we just had a soda to drink. And when I first saw him, because he had a lot of gray hair, I don't look, I'm 45 now. I think I must have been 30, 31 when I met him. And
is there an age gap between you?
He's 12 years. He's 12 years older than me.
Okay.
But I thought he looked older than I expected. So in my head, I was like, I think he's too old for me, but this is fun. He was like, he already made me laugh first thing when we first started chatting. And I was like, he's entertaining there. We can do this. This is nice. And so we drove in my car, and we drove to this restaurant that I knew that was really nice. And we had, and then we had dinner, and then we over ordered, but although I'm a weight loss coach, I do like to eat a lot. So his first impression, but I just stuffed this like giant plate. He was really impressed.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, ladies, do you hear that? How to impress a guy? Eat a lot on the first day.
Yeah. And that was kind of like where I was still like, oh, he could be nice as a friend. He's really funny, but it wasn't like, wow, he's the one at all. And then we decided to go for a second date, and he was going to take me a ride on a motorbike. And I thought, I'm not going to say no to that, because that sounds a lot of fun. Again, not knowing still how long he was going to be there, and then and this was in summer, so we should have worn full leathers like you should, but we weren't. He was wearing like literally shorts and a t-shirt. And I got on the bike, and then I kind of held my arms around him, and then my body just was like, this is the one, and my brain caught up a few minutes later. It was really strange.
It just felt safe,
right?
What would you say that emotion was, or that what was happening in you then?
It was like my body just kind of clicked with his. It just felt so right. And I was like, what? Wait, because I've always been very much like the mindset, and if does he make me laugh, and is he nice? Do I like the way he looked, the way he looks at me? But this was like complete, just like body connection first thing, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Then there's something to be said about like being on a bike and being in that. There's certain situations that really do heighten connection.
Yeah.
Totally. Dancing is one of those, like, there's just certain things that like, oh, wow, this is something really great. And then like, after that, were you still checking him out for other things? Like you kind of knew he was the one, but then was there like, okay, well, he's the one, but I still want to look at all these other things?
No, I didn't think too much about it. It was that moment, and then we went to have dinner, and then we were standing in queue for the toilets, and then we had this funny misunderstanding because I was speaking too fast and he was speaking, I can't remember what, and we just completely we're talking two different things, and when we realized, we just completely cracked up, and I laughed so hard it was like almost peed myself because I was queuing for the toilet, and I thought, oh my god, no guy has ever made me laugh like this.
Yeah, there's something to be said for laughter, and I haven't done like any research or like gone into like relationships and laughter, but I do know, like, even with my husband, like when we're not laughing, we know like, okay, one of us is mad about something, because we just laugh a lot. We're all constantly he's very humorous, so like, and I'm not like the funny person, but it's like we have all these inside jokes, and to us it's like I guess the barometer for our relationship is how much we're laughing on a daily basis. So I think it would be, I don't know if you have any ideas around that, but I do know that laughter just seems to be an indicator.
I think if you can laugh about things, you can't really argue and be laughing about something at the same time. Like if you can laugh it off, and we've had so many, because he's British and I'm Danish, but I live in Spain, so I'm kind of like, bilingual, trilingual, and he will say something and I'm not quite sure what language is coming in, so I might understand something else. So once in a while I'm like, why would you call me that? And he's like, what? It's just being nice, and then we laugh about it.
Yeah, I love that. How long did you date before deciding to commit or get married?
Let me see. We probably, for him it wasn't long. I think we only dated like 5 or 6 times, and then we were on the beach and we were swimming, and then we were laid on the towels, and he was like, I think I love you, and I was like, what does that is that and then I said, that's a really big thing to say. And he was like, oh, I probably shouldn't have said that.
It was like, she didn't say it back.
No, because I wasn't that sure yet. I just didn't want to say anything I wasn't completely sure of.
Do you know why you weren't sure? Like, were you like checking in on your feelings, or was it like your kids, or?
Yeah, I was like, I knew I liked him a lot, and I just wasn't sure, because I'd only been married to I loved one other person, and it had been completely different. I wasn't sure if is this what love looks like. I'll have to think about it, because I hadn't gotten to that stage yet in my head. I wasn't expecting him to say it.
Yeah, and that's such a good question. Like, do we know what love looks like?
Yeah.
Right. I'm working on my next podcast episode is like love versus romance. And we're so conditioned socially and culturally around love and romance. We have a whole genre of romantic movies that tell us what love looks like, or what I don't know, what Hollywood thinks love looks like. But I think there's like a real difference between love and romance. And I think it's really helpful for women to know that flowers on the beach is romance versus love. Love is like a completely different thing. And I think that was a really great question that you asked yourself. Like, I don't know what love looks like. I'm not sure. I want to investigate it. And I think it shows the power of like just really sitting with ourselves and investigating our thoughts and investigating our assumptions, especially around something as big as getting married, choosing a spouse.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't lying to him or lying to myself either. I didn't want to say any, like, to me it's a really big thing to say. So that's why I said to him, it's a really big thing to say. And also the way, because he said, I think I love you. So what should I have said? I think I love you too.
That's
like, do that. What do you do next? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
this was,
but
go ahead.
yeah, so he did show it then because he was like really eager to meet my kids. And obviously I wanted to make sure, first of all, that he was a nice guy, not some psycho. And then so it ended up he had a brother here. He has a brother that has a house here as well. And more friends were coming out, his family. So I said, do you want to bring your kids to this pool party? It's going to be more kids and it's, and I said, yes, but we're just going to introduce you as a friend, they're not my partner. This is just some people I met at the clinic and they're not, and then you can meet them. They can meet you, but not knowing, that we're actually dating. And so he was showing me, and he really wanted me to come and visit him in England. He wanted to meet his parents. He was like all in, and he was just kept showing me how much he was
Yes.
into it.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. Because a lot of times, and here's another thing, sometimes women have a hard time gauging a man's interest. Like, is he interested? He texts me every morning and every night. So he's interested, versus a man who's like, I'm ready to integrate you in my life. I want you to meet my friends at this pool party. I want you to fly over and meet my parents. Like, there's that openness and honesty, right? And accountability. Like, if the person is showing you his life and giving you access to his life, that tells you something more so than, well, I get a morning and evening text every day for 3 months, even though we've never met in person.
Yeah, he said that as well, because we were having like a long distance relationship at the beginning, and when we were texting, he said, whenever I text or email, you write anything and you can take it 2 ways, it will never be the bad way. Whatever you think, it's not, it's always written and sent with good intention. So that was, yeah. But I can see if you don't get that heads up from the start when you're texting, like the guy's texting you, you can just take it so many ways. Like our heads just write this whole story about what this text is really about. And we can
Yes.
take it way.
Oh my God. Yes. This is actually a big thing in my practice with my clients. I'm always like, okay, there's the thing that happened. And then there's a story your brain tells about it. Like, even just this last week, I was talking to a client and she was like, yeah, there's this guy and we have similar jobs and we have similar interests and we have all these things. And then, she went on with her question and I was like, well, how do you know you have similar interests? And she's like, well, it's on his profile. And I was like, okay, so his profile said these things is different from you actually have these things in common. Right. Especially with romantic relationships, our brains love to make that leap from, oh, he has a dog in his picture, to he loves dogs. We don't know that. Yeah. It might be his sister's dog, or he might have taken a picture with a random dog. Like, we have, especially with dating, like, I mean, you want to give people the benefit of the doubt in general in life, but I think dating is one of those places where it can be dangerous to do that. It can be dangerous to err on the side of like, oh, this picture says this, and that means that that's true. Or that means that that's false also. And it goes the other way. Yeah. Like, whichever story, even telling the story that, oh, he's in a picture with a dog means he's lying about loving dogs, or he's trying to get me with a picture of a dog. That's also a story. It's staying in that middle neutral space where, okay, I have this information and I don't have this information. It's a different way of looking at dating, almost a little like dry and practical versus the romantic stories. But I think it's so useful for us to I'm just going to see this and take what I see versus what I'm thinking. All right. I did want to ask you about how, when you introduced your husband to your girls, you said they were 3 and 5 at the time. How did you feel in that moment? Like, what was going on for you?
So first, when like I said, I introduced him as a friend. There was just more people, and he was just one of them, at that point. So, and then he made sure he made a lot of fun with them, playing in the pool, and he was really nice to them. So they met several times where they just saw him as another person that I knew. And then I kind of reversed it in the sense that I asked them permission. I said, I really like this dude. What would you think if I asked him out? So I actually, I guess I basically lied to them, but I did want to feel that they had the control of it. I didn't just want to bring him in and just like, I had this really strong belief that I shouldn't just like force him on top of them, like he's just your new dad or something weird, which he wouldn't be because they still had their dad, but I didn't want to force him upon them. So that's why I made it the other way. And I asked them, what do you think about him and this and the other, what would you think if I asked him out? Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
love
it's
that. And I
actually only
think that
recently they found out the real story when they're 17 and 19.
right. But I can imagine that that gave them permission if there had been something going wrong or
Yeah.
something that they felt uncomfortable with. In this
Yeah.
case, there wasn't, but you gave them permission to let you know.
Yeah. The oldest, she got a bit upset because that was for her. She understood that that was the step that would make dad never come back into our life. And then we had a really good
Oh,
discussion about that. So that opened up that it's not going to happen. This is what we've got now. So in that
yeah.
sense, it was good that we could then, she was only 5, right? But still
Mhm.
she understood enough that another man means that dad is not coming back for sure.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, and children have their thoughts around so many things. I mean, I remember when my husband moved in with us, like everyone in my family is like an introvert. So everyone spends, like my teens, they all spend a lot of time in their rooms, just like as teens will do. But it did change it's interesting. It's the weirdest things. It changed the dynamic of who was in the family areas. Like we have the kitchen and the living room, like kind of like this open floor plan. And that was the one thing my daughter got upset about. She was like there's just more people when I'm trying to read in the kitchen. And it does, and she had thoughts about it. And we had, we talked through it and, gave her permission to, ask for change or ask for what she wanted. And so you really just don't know where their brains will go. I mean, we have to make space for that.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's so easy to just assume that because you know them so well, and you just assume, and we don't. And I think exactly that, the open space to just allow them and then listen to them as well, not just brush them off, or that's silly or whatever. Of course, dad is not coming back. I didn't say that. We talked through it, and then it was okay.
Yeah, well done. So, so now that, I mean, after you got married, did you have to, blend your family? You said his kids were a lot older than your children. Did you have to navigate the typical blended family dynamic? What did that look like for you?
No, not at all. Because first of all, he basically left his job in the UK to move to Spain with me, and all his family was in the UK. His kids, they had their own, they didn't live at home anymore. They had moved out from their moms years ago, and he didn't have that much contact because he didn't have amicable divorces before. So he didn't have that much contact with them, which is sad, but it did make it easy for me. I have met them, but they're not part of my life at all.
Okay. So he moved in to be with you. So did that make that, I mean, I can imagine that made it a lot easier for you and your girls to sort of absorb him into your family.
Yeah. And he also adapted so much to our lifestyle. He's really easygoing. He's not complicated, which is really
Love
nice.
that. How long have you been married now?
We married in 2012. Yeah. So coming up to 10 years now in June. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Did you always know you were going to get remarried? Like, I know you dated, but were you just like, I don't know, I'll see where it goes? Or were you like, I definitely want a partner?
I don't think I thought about it that much, like whether I wanted to get married or not. But then once I got together with him, then I did feel this like crazy urge to be married to him. I can't even tell you why. Maybe because we've been married 3 times before. It's like, why would you want to marry me then?
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you ever worried that oh my God, this guy does not know how to do marriage? Like, because he'd been married. Well, I mean, he'd been married twice and then widowed once. Did that ever give you a concern about his capacity to have a steady relationship?
No, I actually thought a completely other way. I was like, he's been house trained. Yeah, this is cool. I'd much rather have that than some like young love boy that has no clue.
I just love that it really is our thoughts that create our results. Because you're like, yep, he's broken in. He knows how to keep the toilet. Put it down. Put it down or put it up, whichever one. So good. Yeah, so we can really take any perspective we want on anything.
Yeah. It's so powerful. I think like before, because when I met him, I didn't know about life coaching. And in the beginning I had like, before I came across coaching, I remember that's lived literally in our relationship. That's the before and after. And he's noticed it. He's happy. All the money I've paid out of my coaching, he's like, it's just worth it every cent, because I don't have all like exactly all these stories, right? Like, oh, he didn't text me. Like, what does that mean? Is he not like, I'm not important to him? Or, all these like long silence. He's not talking. He's mad at me. No, he's just thinking, like that,
Yeah.
just not turning everything into a drama or something against me or against him or myself. No, that's like exactly like you say, your thoughts. So we just have gotten better and better, especially since that I started coaching. And I would definitely say for your listeners, if you can get a dating coach before you start and ease that in, so you don't have all that drama and all that in the beginning. Definitely, I would have loved to have you 10 years ago.
Yeah, I would have loved to have me too.
Yeah. Exactly.
What's fascinating, and I've told this story so often, is like I almost broke up with my husband at the beginning of our relationship because one, I mean, I knew I wanted to get married and I was dating actively, but when I finally met him and I was like, oh, this is a really nice guy, I didn't quite believe that it was going to work out. So I was kind of like waiting for the other shoe to drop. And a couple of times when we had an argument, there was this one time I was like, okay, that's it. I'm going to set this boundary. And if he doesn't do this, then I'm going to break up with him because I don't have to put up with any of this. And I said, okay, I need to figure out how to set boundaries. So I listened to, and, I'm certified through the life coach school as well. And I hadn't joined at that time. So I went on the podcast and I was like, okay, I'm looking for the one on boundaries. And I listened to the Brooke Castillo's episode on boundaries and then Love 2.0. And then I was like, oh, okay, so I guess I'm the one that needs to change here because I was the one, I had some rules in my head for him. And even though he's like the nicest guy and he's great, I mean, he's not perfect, but in that moment, he was just being himself. And I was the one who wanted to change him to fit what I wanted. And I was getting ready to break up with this guy over my own manual. And I'm so glad I had her as a coach in the sense that I was listening to her podcast at the time, because even though she wasn't talking about dating, it changed my thinking enough that I was able to approach the relationship with just so much more openness and vulnerability and willingness. So it really does make a difference. Our brains can be very sneaky and tricky, especially when you've been through something like a divorce.
So, because I think exactly what you said, like I had one picture of how a guy is supposed to be in a relationship, and that was like the way. That's just how it is, right? Because you've been married once and whatever you used to do together, that's how a marriage is. And so my first husband, he loved talking about his feelings, and we would have an argument where we would talk about it and analyze it up and down roles. And Bruce, my current husband, he's just not like that. He's like, okay, so the argument is over. So what do you want to talk about? Why do you want to talk about it now? And I made it mean a lot of things, as you can imagine. And also I would continue the argument in my head for hours on end because I wanted him to, like, why can't I make him talk about his feelings, and then exactly that, I came across life coaching and then I was like, oh, actually he doesn't need to.
He doesn't need to
take care of my own feelings.
Yes, 100%, 100%. I love that so much. Gunila, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's so inspiring. I really believe that listeners are going to enjoy this so much. Could you please just kind of tell us again where we can find you, what you do, who you help, spell out your social media handle so that those who just want to look you up right away can do that immediately?
Yeah, so the name it's Gunila Life Coach. So Gunila lifecoach.com. That's my website. And it's also the tag you use on Instagram and Facebook where you can find me. I do have a Facebook group for women that are struggling with weight loss and maybe been battling for a while, or maybe I mainly help women that have been struggling and either not manage to get it off from scratch or manage to lose the weight and then put it straight back on. That's why I come in and just help, change the mindset around it so they can actually enjoy the food again, not having to be obsessed about it, not be obsessed about their weight, about diets. I don't do any calorie counting or anything like that. It's all about, approaching it from a new, fresh perspective. So they can join my group, then go into my Facebook page, which is just Gunila Life Coach on Facebook, and then the group is pinned at the top so they can join that.
Awesome.
And thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's been
My
so nice.
pleasure. This was so fun. All right, everyone, look for Gunila on Facebook, join her free Facebook group, follow her on social media. I want to thank you all for your time and attention on the podcast, and I will see you next time.